Greetings and welcome to the Tiger's Den. This is the voice of Cheryl, and I am Toothless Tiger, bringing to you a true story out of New Orleans, Louisiana. I don't know, it's something in the water maybe, or maybe it's in the air. Perhaps it's they call black girl magic. I don't know, but stories like this are popping up throughout the United States, and it's really something to have a conversation about, but I don't know if we really will. I'm bringing to you a breaking news story about Mayor Cantrell from New Orleans, and she was accused of dating an officer, and it was one that used to be in her detail. Now, some people say New Orleans, some say New Orleans, some say New Orleans. So I don't want to offend anybody from the 504. I say New Orleans, and sometimes I say New Orleans. So who knows what I might say. But let's go on with the story. Pretty interesting. It reminds me of Bonnie Willis and Nathan Wade. And so I'm going to show you the news story, and then I'm going to read you the story that they have, and I want to thank WDSU for this fantastic coverage. This just happened yesterday on the 19th. Here we go.
All right, now back to our other big breaking news. Former NOPD officer Jeffrey Vappy indicted by a federal grand jury. He's accused of falsifying his time card, and the feds also say he lied to them about an affair with New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell.
Well, WDSU is bringing you live team coverage today. Investigative reporter Ari Killian has reaction to today's decision.
But first, we begin with WDSU investigator Cassie Sherm breaking down the details in the four corners of the indictment. Cassie.
That's right, guys. So here at federal court, a group of 22 grand jurors came together and indicted former officer Jeffrey Vappy on 7 cases of wire fraud and then a count of falsifying information. Now, we're going to take a look deeper into the larger of the two crimes going on when it comes to defrauding payroll while he was working at NOPD serving the mayor. Now, looking into the indictment against Officer Jeffrey Vappy, the mayor's former executive detail, it alleges Vappy knowingly intended to devise a scheme to defraud and obtain money and property by means of false fraudulent pretenses, representations, and promises, namely submitting full-time cards to NOPD. Between in and around September 2021 and March 2024, Vappy accompanied a public official, one who we now know is Mayor Cantrell, on at least 14 trips outside the state of Louisiana, including to domestic destinations such as Los Angeles, California, San Francisco, California, and Washington, D.C., and international destinations. The city of New Orleans incurred more than $47,000 in costs related to Vappy's work-related trips outside the state of Louisiana with public official one, including travel, lodging, meals, incidentals, and salary. August 2022 and October of 2022, public official one was in New Orleans on approximately 62 days. Vappy was paid for being on duty 51 days. Vappy spent time with public official one inside the Pentalba apartments 25 of those days. Now, in these indictment papers that I have right here, there's a lot more information. One of them alleges that Officer Vappy falsified his time cards more than 20 times, gaining more money than he would have if he would have put his normal hours that he was supposed to put in. And there's even more into this, and we're going to continue to look deeper as this case unfolds. Reporting here at Federal Court, I'm Cassie Sherm. Back to you.
Doesn't that kind of sound familiar? I mean, but they really have it down, and they haven't even been to court, and they have all the details. What I want to do is, like I said, show you the news stories first, and then I'll come back and read what is said in the article. I thought this was very interesting because they said that their affair started in November 2021. I thought that was interesting. And here we go.
Just several weeks ago and has retained former U.S. Attorney Harry Rosenberg as his lawyer.
And the mayor has a lawyer also, and as Cassie said, is mentioned in this indictment, but she has not been charged right now with any crimes. WDSU investigative reporter Aubrey Killian picks up our live team coverage.
And Aubrey, you spoke to legal experts. What are they saying?
Hey there, Gina. So yeah, here at federal court, we spoke with several legal experts, one telling me, quote, "It is a sad day for the city of New Orleans." So take a look. You might be wondering at home, what exactly is next in this very, very high profile case and high profile indictment? So we are told Vappie will be issued a summons. From there, he will have an official court appearance with his attorney. The charges will then be read to him. Vappie will enter a plea and then will likely be given a bond. The case will then proceed. His attorney could have the chance to file motions to fight the charges, and then a trial. It could happen. In the 19-page indictment, what legal experts we spoke with say that they found interesting was the level of details in the document. As for Vappie, the most serious charge is wire fraud. That could involve prison. Legal experts telling me possibly 20 years. While Mayor Cantrell is not specifically named, she is alluded to as a public official in the document. Legal experts saying today, if they were the mayor's attorney, they would be concerned.
I think it's an unfortunate day for the mayor and for the citizens of New Orleans. Certainly you don't want to see elected officials accused of public corruption. It's important to note that she herself is not charged with any crimes. She's not under indictment, and she is still the elected, mayor of New Orleans. And, my hope as a voter and a citizen of the city, my hope is that she played no role in these crimes. My hope is that she had no knowledge of them. And my hope is, that we'll be able to have confidence in our elected officials and their integrity and honesty going forward, whoever they might be.
And moments after that indictment was filed, I reached out to Vappie's attorney. He told me no comment. Reporting live, I'm Aubrey Killian.
When they showed the mayor and the young man eating, that is when I kind of started checking into this story. I didn't report on it, but it was a young lady that lived across the street. They're in the French Quarter, and she said that they were harassing her. Now, somewhere a TPO was filed, but the lady was fighting back, saying that they were harassing her. So I don't know the outcome of that situation. You might want to research it, and if you're interested in the story. I think what's interesting to me is all of these women in political office that we trust to go there and do better than what we say the men can do. And it's an equal employment opportunity. So if men do it, women do too. And I'm not against either one of them doing what they do as individual people. But when they hold the public trust and they're supposed to be working on behalf of the people, as they said, she has not been indicted, so I don't want to make it sound like that she has. But she's mentioned in the indictment. She was at that apartment or home with him. She was on those vacations. So we're going to presume her innocent until proven guilty, the same as he is innocent until proven guilty. Just because you're charged or it is alleged doesn't mean that you will be found guilty of. And that's what we have to keep in our minds in every situation. So I'm going to keep going so we can hear the rest of the news stories. But I do want to just remind you that it just looks bad. And one of the things about when you take the oath of office, you take an oath to the Constitution for the United States of America. And you promise to do everything in your power to defend it and to ensure that the people receive the benefit of the Constitution. And then you take an oath of office, which is basically an ethical oath code of conduct, more or less, and you're saying that you're going to live a certain way. Now, we know we all are not perfect, and we all are human, and things happen. But in certain situations, we just have to make the right decision just because it's the right thing to do. And that's the way it is in everything. So this is not unforgivable or anything, but it could cost you your career or perhaps your freedom. And we wouldn't want to see that. But whatever happens, if you're found guilty, then that has to take place. So let's go with the next story.
You also included in the indictment a letter that the feds say Vappie wrote to the mayor in the summer of 2022 when he was part of her security detail. That letter reads in part, quote, "I'm in our space and I'm feeling so in love with you." It goes on to say, "You got me, baby. It feels so good. It's crazy." Cantrell and Vappie were both married in 2022.
Well,
So I don't know if both were married in 2022 with Wade and Willis, but we do know that he was married and still is. We haven't heard of the finality of his divorce. So this seems to be a going thing, and it doesn't just happen to the black girl Magics. It happened to the other girls too. And we'll see that somewhere in this article. Let's continue with the news story.
And today, the NOPD issued this statement saying the NOPD fully cooperates with federal authorities and remains committed to upholding the highest standards of accountability and integrity. We're dedicated to maintaining the trust of our community through transparency and unwavering service.
All right, and this just into the newsroom. We are hearing from the city for the first time since this indictment was handed up. The city says due to the ongoing nature of the investigation and out of respect for the process, they are withholding comment at this time.
Isn't it amazing how they always withholding comment, but they can't wait to throw and spew all kind of stuff about people that they arrest in these type of situations and indict. It's really amazing, the double standard there. But let's try it again. We're going to see what they have to say in this clip.
You uncovered in the documents from this tape?
Yeah, I mean, we were just looking through it, and a lot of it was regarding messages that have been deleted and possibly encrypted, trying to hide possible relationships. And I'm going to let you go into more detail. You were talking about, this is something that could be pretty damaging.
Yeah, I mean, so of course we're looking at this in real time, right? But there are allegations in here in terms of furthering the scheme to defraud about not just text messages and email messages and cell phone voicemails, but WhatsApp messages that are encrypted. There are some references in here to of the officer allegedly figuring out ways to delete certain messages that he allegedly had with public official one, who I think we can fairly assume is the mayor here. And another thing that kind of jumped out at me is after the internal investigation by NOPD, the interim superintendent, according to the indictment, told the mayor the findings of those investigations, and it seems like recommended that Officer Vappie get reassigned. That's what happened. And then several months after that, there's an allegation in here that the mayor met with the interim superintendent, told the interim superintendent that, I believe it was a she, that she was not going to be named the NOPD superintendent, and Officer Vappie attended that meeting. That jumps out at me.
And that was Chief Woodfork, too, to put that into consideration of where things were in the timeline.
Sure, and I'm not an expert in NOPD hierarchy. It seems a little odd to me that Officer Vappie would be at that meeting. That seems, arguably some level of retaliation. Of course, the mayor might have other thoughts as to why that decision was made. But those are a couple of things that jumped out. The encrypted messages, then the after the fact kind of Google Googling how to delete those messages, coupled with this interim superintendent, Superintendent Woodfork, not getting the job, being told by the mayor that she wasn't getting the job, and Officer Vappy being present for that meeting.
And I mean, one of the things too that we saw in these documents here, guys, is he even had Googled trying to get more information on where a news reporter was living at the time. That's something that is not usually okay for an officer to do, correct?
Yeah, I mean, again, jumps out as a little bit odd. We know there have been a lot of news reports about this investigation, right? There is an allegation in here of the officer Googling where does a certain member of the news media live. There's also allegations in here of Officer Vappy Googling what happened to the mayor of Nashville and that mayor's protective detail, because apparently, and of course this was unknown to me until just reading this, the mayor of Nashville had a similar situation. So you can see kind of a lot of pieces coming together. It's not just a straight payroll fraud, although those are the charges, but you can see kind of a much larger scheme of what these actors, according to the allegations, were doing, knowing they were being investigated, knowing there was an internal investigation by PIB, and ultimately culminating with today's charges.
To have the mayor be listed, as the public official and then listed in there, do you think that's damning or damaging for a sitting mayor?
So, I mean, yes and no. There's one argument would say that for the government and the grand jury to adequately tell the story, they have to list who Officer Vappy was assigned to, right? In this case, it's public official one. It's kind of an incomplete story if you don't have that. On the flip side, these kind of encrypted text messages, how to delete them, what happened to the mayor of Nashville and the mayor's protective detail kind of suggests a little bit more. I mean, I think the ultimate question everybody's going to want to know after this is, what did the mayor know about what Officer Vappy was submitting when he was submitting his timesheets, and when did she know it, right? If the mayor was aware that Officer Vappy was claiming to be on the clock when the government now alleges he wasn't, that could be a potential problem with the mayor. Alternatively,
so now what do we think that the mayor is going to say? She knew? Going to be interesting.
it's possible the mayor had no idea what Officer Vappy was claiming, right? That's going to be the $64,000 question.
Hey, Cassie.
We have another question
Cassie.
from Travers.
Yeah,
Travers, what do you have to ask?
Sure, no, and this is for Matt and Sarah. We appreciate their time. I know Sarah does high-end defense work. Matt does defense work now, but he was one of the people that prosecuted Ray Nagin. It's a simple question. The mayor is not indicted, but she's at least mentioned, possibly implicated in here. If you could ask them, as defense lawyers, what would their advice be to the mayor at this point? We know that Jeffrey Vappy has been charged, but the mayor being mentioned so many times in here, what would their advice be for Sarah and Matt if they were defending the mayor or at least giving the mayor advice at this point?
Yeah, so Travers' question to both of you guys is, Mayor Cantrell's not been, indicted or even implicated necessarily in this, but what would be your advice to the mayor moving forward from this?
Sure. I mean, the mayor has already done the thing that I would first advise her to do, which is to hire counsel. She has a lawyer. She's had a lawyer for some time as this investigation has been going on. And I'm sure that they're going to have, a lot to discuss and follow up on now reading the facts of this indictment. My advice to her also probably would not be to make any public statements concerning what's in this indictment, what the allegations are. I know she may be eager to try to go on TV or make some kind of public statement, proclaiming her innocence or trying to sort of get ahead of this. But as a criminal defense lawyer, very often, we tell folks you want to kind of wait and get a sense of what the full picture is before you start kind of giving your side of the story publicly.
Sure. What about you, Matt?
100% right. Got counsel, that would be the first step. You would almost always caution your client not to make any public statements. Tough when you're talking about a politician, right? There's going to be questions. The mayor is going to be out in public. That's going to be tough for her to do, but that would be something you would certainly counsel your client to do. The other thing you would do is kind of dig into these allegations. They're referencing certain text messages. You'd want to gather all those text messages. Are there other text messages that aren't a part of this indictment? Are there other explanations for why, for example, Officer Woodfork didn't get the job? And again, again, getting back to what we talked about earlier, is there any contemporaneous evidence that suggests the mayor knew that Officer Vappy was submitting what the government now claims are fraudulent timesheets? And you would want, as the mayor's counsel, to find out, what did she know? Is there any documentary evidence of that? Text messages, emails, anything like that?
I have a quick question, too, for both of you guys. So, recently a PIB investigation was just said that an outside consulting firm is looking into Officer Jeffrey Vappy, among other officers, who supposedly had gone in and looked up a woman's information. One of the women's that the mayor had said was stalking her. That claim was dropped by the judge. But could something like that, an ongoing PIB investigation or an investigation for the NOPD, be added to this as well, mid-jury and all this stuff?
I mean, the government always has the right to file what's called superseding indictments, which means that if they develop new evidence or new information of additional federal crimes they believe have been committed, they can do that. At this point, I think it's very premature to say if the results of that investigation would even be criminal in nature, whether or not that would rise to the level of federal criminal charges. I think it's too soon to say whether that's a possibility.
Cassie, one question I think people are wondering from an expert advice, do you anticipate the mayor resigning, staying in office? What do you anticipate?
I mean, look, the mayor hasn't been charged with anything yet, right? So I think regardless of what people's political views are of the mayor, she's not been criminally charged with anything. Even if she were criminally charged, of course, in our system of justice, you're innocent until proven guilty, right? So I'm not a politician, I'm not a political expert, but of course, if I were her lawyer, my advice to her would be like, you haven't been charged with anything. Certainly there's an investigation swirling around, but that doesn't mean she needs to resign or some action should be taken against her at this point.
Does Vappy, reiterate to our viewers, does Vappy keep, I mean, obviously he has not been convicted. Vappy keeps pension, everything, correct?
As far as I know, I believe that would be the case, and that's something that would have to be handled separately internally in terms of the NOPD. But he's already resigned from his position, so he's not currently actively working for the NOPD or on the security detail, and that would be a separate proceeding that would have to be handled, I think, within the NOPD.
Yeah, and I mean, there's cases and jurisprudence that deal with this. My understanding is when a public official gets criminally charged with something, and let's say they get fired as a result of being convicted of those charges, they may forfeit the ability to get any sort of public pension. By voluntarily resigning, I think that probably gives him a leg to stand on in terms of keeping that pension, but honestly, that's been subject to a lot of court decisions in the last kind of decade, so don't know the answer to that.
And we have another question from Travers, if you don't mind asking that, Travers.
Look, Sarah is a great defense attorney, but Matt ran public corruption with the U.S. Attorney's Office. He prosecuted Ray Nagin. When you read something like this, and you are mentioning public official A, who is clearly Mayor LaToya Cantrell, when prosecutors do that, they're not doing it blindly. There is a reason for that. Can you ask him, is the end game here bigger than Jeffrey Vappy?
Do you think the end game here is bigger than Jeffrey Vappy when it comes to, they listed the official A and then the mayor is being listed within here? Travers said, normally they don't just throw things in there to throw things in there.
Yeah, I mean, in any government investigation, you're going to be looking at all the potential parties, and generally the government's job here, the Department of Justice's job, is to hold people accountable for their wrongdoing. If there is evidence to suggest the mayor knew about this, or maybe even other things, we know there have been other allegations swirling about there, it could mean that this is a small part of what's a larger investigation. It could mean, as Sarah pointed out, a superseding indictment or further charges. I think it's premature at this point. We really don't know. There isn't anything directly on point in this charge that suggests she knew what he was representing about his timesheets. Now, like any criminal case, Officer Vappy has now been charged. He has the opportunity to defend himself in court. He'll have an opportunity to go to trial. He also has the opportunity to plead guilty and potentially cooperate, right? He may have information, maybe not, but he also could have information that might help the government. If that information implicates somebody else, the mayor or anybody else, that's something the Department of Justice is always interested in hearing. So it's possible that could go there. We just don't know at this point.
And I mean, that's been done in the past where someone has been convicted or even during the during the trial has come forth with new information to try to get a lesser charge?
Yeah, not just done in the past, that's common, right? Again, I'll reference the Nagin case. There was the Greg Mefford indictment involving Greg Mefford, the former chief technology officer, and a city contractor. There were other public officials wrapped in that. And then as a follow-on to that, Mayor Nagin was indicted and ultimately convicted. So that is common in the system.
And take me a little bit back to, like, you being there.
Let me stop it right there and just iterate that I've been doing a series on the Sixth Amendment, the trial penalty, and how they try to take away our Sixth Amendment rights. And that is federal law. And what they want you to do is cop a plea. And if you don't participate with what they want you to do, you could very well be facing a lot of time. So this is going to be very interesting, and I hope all come out well for them, but we'll just see. So let me get back to the story. We're almost finished with this one.
There with Ray Nagin's conviction, I mean, that was a long process in itself.
Yeah, Greg Mefford, the first indictment, I believe, came out in 2011. Ray Nagin wasn't indicted until 2014, and I believe he was convicted either in 2015 or 2016. And I can tell you the Mefford indictment didn't start when he was indicted. It started, actually I take that back because I'm thinking about this. I think the Mefford indictment might have been 2009. So you're really talking about a multi-year process. And in that case, you're talking about multiple public officials and multiple kind of schemes to defraud there. So this could be, that was a 4, 5, 6 year process. This could be similar. It may not be, but that's how long these things generally take.
And that was prior to everything, the gathering information too. So that includes all of that.
Yeah, that's right. So as I'm thinking more about it, I mean, the Mefford indictment, I believe, as I'm thinking about it, was 2009. That investigation started at least a year or two before that, right? So, there's a year or two of gathering records, analyzing those records, interviewing witnesses, determining what potential charges and wrongdoing could be there, right? Then there's the indictment. Then there's the criminal justice system. In that case, one of the defendants chose to go to trial. He went to trial. After that conviction, Mayor Nagin was indicted, and there was a follow-on. So again, multi-year process and starts from not just when the indictment is brought, but months, years before that.
How sensitive is it when you have a case that obviously had someone connected with the mayor as even an employee?
Well, I mean, they're always sensitive. I mean, grand jury investigations by law are supposed to be secret. Prosecutors aren't supposed to be talking about them. Grand jurors are prohibited from talking about them. And then when you're talking about a small community like New Orleans, and then you add on top of that the fact that this is a public corruption type of an investigation, it is really very sensitive. And one of the things from a law enforcement perspective I can tell you is the more time that passes that you are acting in a covert status, right, without other people knowing about it, without news reporters reporting on it and everything else, the more likely you're going to get people to talk to you, right? And so that's some of the things that, helps prosecutors as they are building these sorts of cases. Obviously, this has been subject to news reports going back months or even a year or more, right? So a little bit different posture here, but yeah, they are very secret, and that's just the way it is.
And with this case,
I just kind of go back to Ray Nagin. I don't know if you all are familiar with what was going on in New Orleans with Hurricane Katrina, and he seemed to have been the hero as I can remember it. And then after Katrina is when the problem came and all of the monies came in, and that's when the, secret was out. It's really sad, but that's what it seems like that's happening with these people in positions. We vote them in office thinking that they're going to, take care of our interests, and perhaps they do to some extent. But my saying is always, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And when you feel you don't have to answer to anybody but the people, and the people are the least educated on the system in which you operate, then you kind of end up in that absolute corruption seat. But let's finish this up.
Do you think that it could be possible that Officer Jeffrey Vappy would flip and cooperate to create a new indictment?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know. As his lawyer, I'm sure his lawyer has talked to him about this process. I mean, one of the things we can deduce is the fact that this is an indictment, right? Generally, in a white-collar case, the U.S. Attorney's Office would approach a potential target with his or her lawyer and would give them the opportunity to plead guilty, not through an indictment, but through what we call a bill of information, right? At this point, given that Officer Vappy has been indicted, that suggests, at least right now, he doesn't believe the charges, he's not interested in cooperating or anything like that. But could it go there? Sure. Lots of defendants plead guilty after they're criminally charged. It's a common occurrence. And of course, if he has information as his lawyer, you would be talking to him about, here's ways to potentially help yourself out. Do you have any information that would help the government potentially go after others?
Is there any time that if you had more information and you tell it, but it could probably hurt you also telling it, would that be able to be in the process too?
So what typically happens in those scenarios is once you've agreed to a plea deal with the government, now we're getting, of course, way ahead of ourselves, right? But if Officer Vappy decided to cooperate, he would almost certainly be required to plead guilty to some of these charges in here. And essentially what happens is you plead guilty and the government grants you immunity for any further wrongdoing you've done, right? As long as you come in and are honest about everything that you've done, they've held you responsible for the charges in this indictment, and then you get immunity for everything else, assuming you tell the full truth. And of course, in the government's eyes, you're hoping that that leads to charges against others.
Travers has a couple more questions, I think.
Yeah, no, Cassie, I appreciate it. I know this is happening in real time out there. We just got the indictment and we're all looking through it right now. But given Matt Chester's background on something like this, I know he can't hear me, so if you can relay something like this. Anytime that a public official like this, like the mayor, public official A or public official 1, when they're mentioned in a criminal indictment like this, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is that for them? And I'm not trying to put the cart before the horse, and Mayor Cantrell has not been charged with any crimes, but just the fact that federal prosecutors felt it worth mentioning her in this federal indictment, on a level of 1 to 10, how bad is that for the person usually?
Yeah, so with your experience, having seen this, in the past, having an official be listed in this indictment here on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad would you say that is? Travers and loves his numbers.
I know Travers, yes. So, I mean, again, I think there's an argument that public official 1, who again I think we can deduce as the mayor, there's an argument that had to be included in here because it completes the story of who Officer Vappy was assigned to. But, I mean, if I were the mayor's counsel, I would be concerned about some of these allegations. They're talking about, again, the text messages between the two of them, messages that are encrypted between the two of them, post-investigation deleting those messages between the two of them. That suggests that the government is at least looking at the mayor, concerned about that sort of a conduct, and you want to evaluate as the mayor's counsel whether the mayor's done anything wrong and whether the government might view the mayor as having done anything wrong. So not a great look for the mayor, right? Not something that as the mayor's counsel you would want. But again, there's no kind of silver bullet that clearly indicates that the mayor knew what Vappy was attesting to. So still kind of premature to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely doesn't paint a great picture here when you're talking about relationships and hiding things.
Yeah, unfortunately, New Orleans has had its fair share of this sort of a thing. So certainly not a great picture when you're talking about public dollars and the allegation of being misused. Now, I will say, this is just an indictment, right? Every defendant's innocent until proven guilty. Indictments are just allegations. So, now Officer Vappy will have the opportunity to defend himself and the government will have the opportunity to convict him, and we'll have to see how it plays out.
Travers, did you have any questions?
Sure, I have. I think we all have a lot, Cassie. When it comes to Officer Jeffrey Vappy, and I know that obviously this is focusing on him today, he is now charged with all of these crimes. When it comes to this, and look, you're looking at the counts right here. counts 1 through 7, wire fraud, and then count 8, making a false statement. But the wire fraud obviously deals with payroll-related topics and also the hours that he worked. The mayor is the CEO of the city. She runs the police department. Cassie, this is a question for Matt Chester, he's got a great experience level when it comes to these kind of public corruption cases, not just running that division, but also handling the Mayor Ray Nagin case. When it comes to something like this, does Jeffrey Vappy become a cooperating witness? Because we've seen so many times, and he mentioned people, Greg Meffert in the Nagin case, you've heard Matt Chester mention, became a star witness in the Nagin case. Could you ask Matt Chester this? Could Jeffrey Vappy essentially go from criminal defendant to star witness in any potential future case when it comes to the city, the NOPD, or possibly the mayor?
Yeah, that's right. That's a really great question, Travers. So do you think that in this instance that possibly Jeffrey Vappy could go from being indicted to being possible key witness in a possible indictment in the future?
Sure. I mean, that's what happened with Greg Meffert, right? He was criminally charged. He, at some point in the process, chose to cooperate. Now, he ultimately pled guilty. He was ultimately sentenced to some term of imprisonment. But he was a key witness in the Mayor Nagin case, right? He was one of the government's bigger witnesses to provide direct testimony about what the mayor at that time was doing. So, when you're talking about a sprawling investigation like this, multiple layers, multiple people involved, that's not uncommon. So it's possible it could go there. Don't really know yet for sure, but certainly possible.
And with
That's the only thing when it's public, when it's published, and everybody has access to what's going on. You have problems like this because you get a lot of questions, and all of it is speculation, but people's mind formulate all kind of ideas, and really we want to know as the public, and especially when you start hearing the dollar amounts that are entrusted to these individuals, and then the things that they're doing outside of the scope of their employment. And that kind of what gets you. And you look at the condition of the cities and how nothing has changed for the Asiatic community at all. And it's just disheartening, to say the least.
these two charges that are going on right now, which would you say is the worst of the two when it comes to breaking these laws?
Yeah, so I mean, the two charges as I read this are essentially false statements and wire fraud. Wire fraud is by far the more serious charge. It carries a higher term of imprisonment. It involves kind of more serious conduct when you're talking about actually enriching yourself while, according to the government, while lying, while doing so, right? False statements are serious. They are a federal crime. They carry a lower term of imprisonment. It's just essentially the allegation that you lied to a federal agent. So between the two, wire fraud certainly more severe than the false statements charge.
When it comes to wire fraud, real quick, how long of a term could you be serving for something like that?
Yeah, so I figured you might ask me that question. So wire fraud carries a maximum possible penalty of 20 years in jail for each count. Now, sentencing in federal court is a complicated process. At the end of the day, sentencing is left up to a judge. Judges have lots of discretion. They can't go above 20 years with respect to a wire fraud count, but they could go as low as probation. What typically happens if a defendant is convicted, there's a process by which the U.S. sentencing guidelines come into play. That's a formulaic book that essentially spits out what is considered to be a reasonable number, right? And so my guess is, in a case like this, Officer Vappy is first-time offender, it's a nonviolent offense, you're probably looking at some term of imprisonment, but nowhere near 20 years, anywhere potentially 3, 4, 5, somewhere in that neighborhood generally is, depending on the money involved and the conduct involved, that's the sort of thing that you would be looking at for a first-time offender.
Matt, thank you so much for your invaluable information. I know, guys, we have a lot of questions that we still want answered, and we're going to continue to try to ask those questions for you and guys get more information. But for right now, Travers, I'm going to send it back to you, and I'll let you guys know if I have any other update.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it, and we appreciate Matt Chester's insight. He was one of the two lawyers.
I think this may be the last one. I think. No, it's one more. And they're not that long. So we're almost done.
Now, New Orleans leaders are reacting to this news right now.
WGSU reporter Jonah Gilmore is live. Jonah, you talked to officials with the Metropolitan Crime Commission. What are they saying about this bombshell indictment?
Well, the head of the Metro Crime Commission tells me this is not shocking considering the investigation has been going on for about 2 years, but tells me he believes this is just the beginning. Rafael Gornachi says he saw indications that this would happen when retired NOPD officer Jeffrey Vappy hired a defense attorney. He says in the last 2.5 weeks, there was another subpoena issued for the interviews he gave about the complaints MCC filed surrounding 2 photos of Vappy and Mayor LaToya.
That photo a moment ago, they were on that patio where the lady was looking out of her apartment and took the pictures. And she reversed it where the mayor had said she was stalking her. She put it back on the mayor. And I believe she received the TPO. I'm not quite sure. Might want to look that up. Don't take my word for it because I'm not 100% sure. But let's finish hearing what he has to say.
Cantrell'S. According to Gornachi, the indictment says that Vappy was billing the city of New Orleans as a police officer when he wasn't performing those duties while with the mayor. He believes we have already seen a glimpse of what the possible next steps by the feds since they are looking into mayor's cell phone records and other forms of communication.
Is that if you're a public official and you betray the public trust, you use your office for your own personal enrichment, you're going to be held accountable, whether you're a police officer or if you're the mayor of the city of New Orleans.
He adds the grand jury's assignment ends next month and believes more indictments could be coming from this. We're live outside City Hall. Jonah Gilmore, WDSU News.
Is listed as public official 1 in this, not indicted, not accused of any wrongdoing, but definitely at least implicated for what the feds say was a romantic involvement with Jeffrey Vappy.
That's right, Travers. Of course, we've been staying on top of this moment by moment. Sarah's had a moment to we've been diving deeper and deeper into the documents. Sarah, touch on specifically page 7 is a large revelation, as well as 10, really the whole thing. But as we have had some time to go through it, what's our latest take that we've been going through?
Yeah, one of the things that stands out about this indictment is the information that relates to former interim superintendent of the NOPD, Michelle Woodfork. And there's suggestions in the indictment. Well, we know there were disciplinary actions that were taken against Jeffrey Vappy in 2023, internal Public Integrity Bureau disciplinary actions that were the result of his time cards that he submitted. It appears from the indictment that when Superintendent Woodfork advised the mayor that she was planning to sustain those disciplinary actions, that at that point Jeffrey Vappy attempted to influence that decision. The indictment alleges that he contacted Michelle Woodfork, that he tried to talk to her about it, asked her to quote unquote make it right, and that he also met up with her or tried to meet up with her at a daiquiri shop to discuss the findings of that investigation. The other thing that's significant is that it's sometime after that Mayor Cantrell made the decision not to give Michelle Woodfork the job as permanent chief of the New Orleans Police Department, but instead gave that job to another candidate. And so the implication potentially is that Michelle Woodfork may also be someone who's cooperating with the federal government in developing this case.
If this doesn't sound like Fonny and Nathan, and then what Fonny turned around and did to Miss, I think is it Timpson? One of those. But if this doesn't sound like the whistleblower situation in Atlanta, let me say it like that, because I hate to mess up anyone's name. Maybe not the same scenario, the same example, but overall, it just sounds familiar. I'll say that. Familiar.
Talk about how that would work, how the conversations would go to our viewers, kind of explain how that would work if she has been speaking with investigators.
Yeah, I mean, these federal prosecutors and the agents investigating these cases are extremely diligent, and so they'll reach out to anyone that they think may have information to request voluntary interviews. People have the option to come in and voluntarily provide information to law enforcement. They can, come in with lawyers, but some of the information in the indictment at least suggests that the federal investigators may have gotten information from Michelle Woodfork about that.
And we were speaking a moment ago, there's some additional information kind of deeper in the document. What is your take on that aspect that we were speaking on?
Sure. I mean, the timeline, lays out pretty clearly that there was an internal investigation into Jeffrey Vappy about, allegedly submitting false time cards, that sometime after that, Michelle Woodfork indicated she was going to sustain the findings, the disciplinary action, and that after Vappy's alleged unsuccessful attempts to change her mind, that Mayor Cantrell made the decision not to give her the job as police chief. And what's interesting is that they note that at the meeting where that's discussed with the mayor and Woodfork, that Vappy was actually present for that meeting. Now, whether he's there in his official capacity as her executive protection or for some other purpose, is an open question. But that is, it's something to note.
And also important to note, at this time, Mayor Cantrell is not specifically listed in any of the documents as we're going through. Her name, correct?
Her name does not appear. That's exactly right. They refer to her as a public official one. You can tell from the context that public official one is the mayor, but her name is not mentioned and she is not charged with any crimes.
Very important note, Sarah. I appreciate your time and providing such great insight. Travers, we'll send it back to you.
All right, Aubrey, Cassie, Sarah, Matt, we appreciate your time. Obviously,
okay, so that's the end of the video. Let me now just read the article for you. New Orleans. A former New Orleans Police Department officer who has been under a federal investigation for weeks has been indicted on 7 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of making false statement charges. A grand jury indicted former Officer Jeffrey Vappy on Friday. New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell was implicated in the indictment as Public Official 1, Mayor of the City of New Orleans. Vappy is accused of incurring more than $47,000 in costs connected to work trips while he traveled with Cantrell. Those costs includes meals, lodging, incidentals, and his salary. According to the incident, Vappy knowingly submitted false time cards to NOPD in excessive payments. Now, if $47,000 includes all of that, I wonder how much did he make? This got to be more to it than that. According to the indictment, Vappy knowingly submitted false time cards to NOPD in excessive payments. According to the indictment, Vappy and Cantrell began a romantic relationship in November 2021. Sounds familiar? A relationship the indictment said Vappy routinely denied having. And this is just a photo of the New Orleans mayor implicated in criminal indictment against former bodyguard. The indictment goes on to say that Vappy and Cantrell exchanged personal and romantic messages through photographs, text messages, voice notes, and WhatsApp encrypted messages. Vappy is also accused of deleting the messages. Wonder how many did they have in number? Also included in the indictment was a letter that the feds say Vappy wrote to the mayor in the summer of 2022 when he was part of her security detail. "I'm in our space and feeling so in love with you," Vappy wrote. "You got me, baby. And it feels so good. It's crazy." The indictment claims that Vappy and Cantrell often ate meals and consumed alcohol together while he was on the clock. Cantrell is also accused of appointing Vappy to the HANO board, where he attended meetings while on the clock with NOPD, according to the indictment. Vappy is also accused of conducting multiple searches online regarding a case where the former mayor of Nashville was accused of having a relationship with her bodyguard. He also is accused of searching how secure is WhatsApp. Now let me get back to that photo, because the photo here is the mayor that had an affair in Nashville. Nashville mayor affair. More on the case. Former NOPD officer Jeffrey Vappy is accused of researching. The indictment goes on to say that Vappy tried to influence the former interim superintendent of the NOPD. The indictment does not name the interim superintendent, but Michelle Woodfork served in the role during the time Vappy worked with the mayor. According to the indictment, Vappy is accused of also taking Woodfork to a daiquiri shop to discuss her demotion and mitigate her disappointment when she was not promoted. It is important to note that Cantrell has not been indicted. However, sources tell WDSU that she has been under investigation for weeks for her alleged involvement in Vappy's time cards. As previously reported, Cantrell has received subpoenas dating back a year ago. Her controversial use of the city-owned Puntable, and I think you say that Pontalba apartment in the French Quarter was stripped by the city council. The city of New Orleans issued the following statement regarding the indictment. So I guess that was their little hidden place if they stripped it from her. Due to the ongoing nature of the investigation and out of respect for the integrity of the process, we will withhold any comments at this time. And you know, I had to just put my little 2 cents in there because they ain't said nothing about that. But it just sounds good at the moment. The New Orleans Police Department issued the following statement regarding the indictment against Vappy. Today, former officer Jeffrey Vappy was federally indicted. The NOPD fully cooperates with the federal authorities and remains committed to upholding the highest standards of accountability and integrity. We are dedicated to maintaining the trust of our community through transparency and unwavering service. For further details, please refer to the appropriate federal agencies. Well, it would be beautiful if they lived by all of those beautiful words that they use when they're describing themselves once they get caught doing wrong. The attorney representing Vappy's wife in his divorce case says she has no comment. Here's another divorce case. The Metropolitan Crime Commission issued the following statement regarding the indictment against Vappy. Today, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Louisiana announced a federal indictment of former New Orleans police officer Jeffrey Vappy II for 7 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of making false statements to the FBI. The MCC's assistance in this matter is acknowledged in the U.S. Attorney's press release linked below. The MCC congratulates the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Eastern District of Louisiana, and the New Orleans Office of Inspector General for their work in obtaining this indictment. The New Orleans Police Justice Foundation issued the following statement regarding Jeffrey Vappy's indictment. While the indictment of Officer Vappy does not come as a surprise in light of the ongoing investigation, it should be noted that there are 900 women and men at the NOPD who daily perform their duties with honesty and integrity. This indictment should not overshadow the great work of our officers, resulting in unalivings, shootings, armed robberies, and carjackings, down at nearly double the national average. Earlier reports. In September 2022, the Metropolitan Crime Commission issued a report shedding light on Mayor LaToya Cantrell's use of the then city-owned Cantrell'S apartment. The MCC issued photos of her entering the apartment, attending gym classes in the French Quarter, and sitting on the balcony. The report accused the mayor of living at the apartment full-time. In November 2022, it came to light that one of the mayor's officers on her security detail, Jeffrey Vappy, was accused of having a relationship with the mayor while also working on her detail. And this is the history of New Orleans mayor mentioned in federal indictment. An investigation was launched by the PIB into the allegations, and Vappy was later taken off the mayor's detail. Vappy's time cards would become the center of a PIB investigation. His time card showed him routinely working more than 16-hour shifts while serving on the mayor's security team. Leaked audio from the PIB investigation showed Vappy being grilled on staying at the Cantrell'S apartments at the same time as the mayor. A divorce filing from Vappy's wife alleged that their possible relationship started in 2021. The PIB's investigation concluded that Vappy violated NOPD's professionalism rules and duties, as well as time card infractions. A federal judge ruled that the PIB's investigation violated the consent decree due to the way it was handled. Some of those violations include failing to accurately and completely record all allegations against Vappy, failing to give meaningful consideration to circumstantial evidence available to the PIB investigators that could have suggested to a reasonable person that Vappy charged the NOPD for time not worked, failing to take reasonable measures to protect the confidentiality of its investigatory materials. In response to this federal ruling, NOPD Superintendent Ann Kirkpatrick has sent Judge Morgan a remedial plan. She is promising to improve the PIB training and be more transparent with investigations with motions during the process. Following the PIB investigation and federal ruling, Vappy was reassigned to the mayor's security team in January 2023. Vappy continued on the mayor's detail until April 25th, when new photos surfaced of Mayor Cantrell and Vappy eating lunch in the French Quarter. The MCC pressed for an investigation into whether or not the lunch was paid for by the city. The picture showed Cantrell and Vappy drinking wine during the lunch. The MCC also questioned whether or not Vappy was on the clock. In June, it was confirmed that Vappy would be resigning from the NOPD effective June 29th. He had been with the department since 1997. So that goes to show that this stuff is happening throughout the United States, and I'm sure if I looked at the news, I could find some stuff to report on in my town. I do know I have a story coming about the juvenile justice system and how it's being handled. So perhaps that'll be my next video. But this was so, to me, parallel to what's going on in Atlanta. And I don't know if the other women, well, the lady in Dalton, the mayor in Dalton, she has about the same temperament. And there are a couple other mayors that's kind of out of control. We have commissioners that are out of control, female commissioners that are harassing these men and actually getting lawsuits filed against them, and they're winning. So what is that telling us? Where is this energy coming from the women? Because it's more masculine in the way that they're being so boisterous, and the way they just come across so arrogant and so rude. Now, I'm not saying men are arrogant and rude. I'm just trying to equate that to masculinity, if you can catch my drift. And so I don't want to insult any men, but I'm just talking about the difference in the yin and the yang and strength. They say that we're strong women, but we're powerful women. Strength comes in numbers. And of course, men have the physicality of strength. So I wanted to report on this. There are some things going on with the YSL. It's kind of right now, they're just doing motions, and so they'll be filing motions, and I'm sure I'll be talking about that Sunday. Mr. Steele filed a motion too, as a matter of fact. And so I'm sure that there will be more. But I try to bring you a true story throughout. We're in trouble as a people. I'm talking about people. We're in trouble. And we have some real life issues to be dealing with. And then we have these people who we entrust to help fund our cities and keep things running. But they seem to be very self-indulgent. I don't know. But that is the story of Mayor Cantrell and her indicted ex-bodyguard. So we'll keep up with that story just to see how it goes, and to see, hopefully she's not indicted on anything, but time will tell. If you got this far in the video, please like, subscribe, and share it. Also, consider becoming a member. Why don't you go ahead and join? You can join for as little as 99 cents, $1.99, $2.99, $3.99, $9.99, and of course, the VIP is $24.99. But share the video, like it, talk about it. It's a good conversation piece. And maybe we can have some conversations for real and try to see how we can help change our community and what's happening to us as a people, because it is so disheartening for all of this to be going on. And we say the children are our future, but unfortunately, I don't know nothing that we're giving them and we're teaching them. I don't know if we've even prepared the next set of up and coming people to run for local offices, and time is waiting on none of us. So we must get busy. On that note, as you know, I believe the children are our future. And that's how I end. I'm leaving the tiger's den. Good night. I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense of pride to make it easier. Let the children's laughter remind us who we used to be. Everybody's searching for a hero. People need someone to look up to. I never found anyone to fulfill my needs. A lonely place to be. So I learned to depend on me. I decided long ago never to walk in anyone's shadow. If I failed, if I succeed, at least I'll live as I believe. No matter what they take from me, they can't take away my dignity, because the greatest love of all is happening to me. I found the greatest love of all inside of me. The greatest love of all is easy to achieve. Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. And if by chance that special place that you've been dreaming of takes you to a lonely place, find yourself in love.